The alarm started at dawn, was drinking coffee in her small office when the first explosion shook station. The cup fell from her hands and shattered on the floor. She ran to the window and saw fire blooming in the distance, across the station's outer ring. "All personnel, this is not a drill," the speakers crackled. "We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack." His heart pounded. She was a liaison officer, not a soldier. Her job was to help different species talk to each other, to solve problems with words. She had never been in a real fight. She grabbed her tablet and ran into the corridor. Aliens of every kind were rushing past her. The tall, bird-like, were flapping their feathered arms in panic. The small, fuzzy, were squeaking in fear. Everyone was running toward the center of the station. Someone called. She turned and saw Ambassador pushing through the crowd. The diplomat's orange feathers were ruffled with stress. "What's happening?" "I don't know," said. "I'm trying to find out." They reached the command center together. Inside, it was chaos. Screens showed the enemy ships attacking from all sides. They were ugly things, covered in spikes and bone-like armor. They looked like giant insects from a nightmare. Someone whispered, "They found us." Felt cold. Everyone in the galaxy feared them. They were a species that ate entire planets. They traveled in huge swarms, killing everything in their path. Colonies that met them simply disappeared. "Where are our defenses?" Ambassador asked the station commander. The commander, a male named, stared at his screens with dead eyes. "Gone. They destroyed our weapons in the first attack. We have nothing left to fight with." "Then call for help," said. "Call the Confederacy fleet." "I did." His voice was flat. "They said they're too far away, they said." He stopped talking. "They said what?" demanded. "They said to evacuate if we can. They said the station is already lost." Silence fell over the command center. Outside the windows, more explosions lit up the darkness. The ships were everywhere now, like locusts covering the sky. "How many people are on the station?" asked quietly. 50,000, said. "Civilians, families, children." "And how many evacuation ships do we have?" "Maybe enough for 3,000, maybe." Ambassador made a sound like a wounded bird. "They're abandoning us. The Confederacy is abandoning us." Watched the screens. They were landing now, boarding the outer sections of the station. She could see them moving in the cameras. They were huge, twice the size of a human, with too many legs and mouths that opened the wrong way. "Send a general distress call," said. "To everyone, every species in range." Looked at her. The Confederacy already refused. "Then ask someone else," shouted. She was surprised by the anger in her voice. "There are 50,000 people here, 50,000 lives. Someone has to care, someone has to come." Ambassador nodded. She moved to a communications console and started typing with her clawed hands. "I'm sending it now, broadcasting on all channels, requesting immediate aid." Minutes passed, then hours. The responses started coming in. "The collective sends their sympathies," read, "but their fleet is engaged elsewhere. The Assembly regrets they cannot assist. They say fighting is not practical. The Empire suggests we surrender. They say the sometimes leave survivors." With each message, felt her hope dying. The galaxy was full of advanced species, powerful militaries, ancient civilizations, but none of them would help. None of them would fight. "We need to move everyone to the central ring," said. "The habitat section. It has the strongest walls. We can barricade ourselves there." "For how long?" asked. "They'll break through eventually." "Then we buy time," said. "Maybe someone will change their mind. Maybe help will come." She didn't really believe it, but what else could they do? They spent the next 6 hours moving everyone they could reach. 50,000 frightened aliens, all different shapes and sizes, all running for their lives. They were slow, methodical. They cleared each section completely before moving to the next. It gave the civilians time, but not much. Helped carry children. She guided the elderly. She held the hands of people who were too scared to move. Ambassador worked beside her, using her authority to keep everyone calm. The command center received more messages, but they were all the same. Sympathy, regrets, no help. 12 hours, said quietly. That's how long we have before they reach the central ring. Sat down heavily. Her legs hurt, her back hurt. She was so tired. Around her, thousands of families huddled together, holding each other. Some were praying, some were crying, some just stared at nothing. I'm sorry, Ambassador said. She sat beside. I thought the galaxy was better than this. I thought we helped each other. Maybe we're just not worth the risk, said bitterly. Maybe 50,000 lives aren't enough. Her tablet beeped, almost ignored it. Another rejection, probably. Another species explaining why they couldn't possibly help. But she looked anyway. The message was short. It wasn't from any government or fleet command. It was a military code, encrypted, sent on an old Earth frequency that barely anyone used anymore. Marines inbound, 14 hours, hold the line. Stared at it, her hands started shaking. What is it? Asked. I don't know if this is real, whispered. She showed the ambassador the message. Read it 3 times. Marines, human Marines. That's what it says. But Earth is so far away. How could they possibly get here in 14 hours? Didn't answer. She was thinking about stories she'd heard, stories about human soldiers. The galaxy thought humans were weak because they were new, because they didn't have the biggest ships or the oldest technology. But humans had something else. They had a reputation. They were the ones who didn't run. We need to tell everyone, said. She stood up, even though her legs shook. We need to tell them to hold on for 14 more hours. But what if it's not real? Asked. What if it's a mistake? Looked at the message again, at those simple words, hold the line. Then we die hopping, she said. But I think someone's coming. I think someone finally answered. Outside, the power began to fail. Lights flickered across the central ring. In the distance, they could hear the breaking through the barricades, screeching, hungry. But 50,000 civilians stood together in the darkness, and they waited. 14 hours. They just had to survive 14 more hours. Closed her eyes and prayed that humans were as crazy as the stories said. Captain Park stood in the troop bay of this hammer, watching his Marines prepare for the drop. 600 soldiers checking weapons, tightening armor, saying quiet prayers. Some of them were barely 20 years old. Some had families back home. All of them knew what they were about to do. Captain, his second-in-command, called. Lieutenant was younger than him, faster, better with technology. We're 10 minutes out. Command wants to brief you again. Nodded and moved to the tactical display. The image of station rotated slowly, covered in red markers. Each marker was a position. There were so many. Sir, the fleet admiral's voice came through. Admiral Song sounded tired. I need to confirm you understand the situation. We're detecting at least 15,000 on that station. You have 600 Marines. I can count, Admiral said. This is a recovery mission, not an assault. Get the civilians out and retreat. Don't try to be a hero. Smiled grimly. Understood, sir. He cut the connection before the Admiral could say anything else. Heroes. Everyone always talked about heroes, but the people down there didn't need heroes. They needed someone who would fight. Listen up, his voice carried across the troop bay. 600 faces turned toward him. You all know why we're here. 50,000 civilians are trapped on that station. They are killing them, and every other species in this galaxy said no. He paused, let that sink in. They said no because it's too dangerous, because it's not worth the cost, because those people down there aren't their problem. His voice got harder. But they made one mistake. They asked humanity for help. A few Marines chuckled. Some banged their fists against their armor. When someone calls for help, we answer, continued. That's what we do. That's what makes us Terrans, that's what makes us Marines. He looked at each of them. It's going to be hell down there, but we're going to get those people out. Every single one we can save. Are you with me? The roar that answered him shook the entire bay. Sergeant was checking her heavy plasma cannon for the third time. The weapon was almost as big as she was, designed to punch through vehicle armor. She'd need it against the... They had thick shells, hard to kill. "Hey, Sarge," Private Sora Nam said. The young medic looked nervous. "Is it true they eat their prisoners?" "Focus on your job," Nam said, but she didn't say no. Corporal Minyu Lee slid into the seat beside them. The combat engineer was carrying enough explosives to level a building. "Heard the odds are 25 to 1. "I can't count that high," said dryly. Minyu grinned. "Good thing we're not here to count." The drop alarm sounded. Red lights flashed. Everyone moved to their pods, strapped himself in and checked his rifle one last time. The pods were essentially armored coffins shot from the ship at high speed. Half the galaxy thought humans were insane for using them. "Launch in 60 seconds, the computer announced. Closed his eyes, thought about the message had received. Hold the line, such simple words, but they meant everything. They meant someone was coming, they meant don't give up. 30 seconds. He hoped they'd held long enough. 10 seconds, 9, 8. The pod launched. Stomach dropped as acceleration crushed him into his seat. Outside, he knew, hundreds of other pods were falling like rain toward station. They were shooting at them. Some pods would be hit. Some Marines would die before they even landed. But most would make it through, because humans built their equipment to take punishment. The pod shook violently, heard metal screaming, then impact. The crash was brutal, throwing him against his restraints hard enough to hurt even through the armor. His pod had punched straight through the station's hull. The door exploded open, rolled out, rifle up, scanning for targets. He was in a cargo bay. We're everywhere. They turned toward him, their multiple mouths opening in surprise. They hadn't expected the pods to breach the interior walls. Opened fire. His rifle spat plasma bolts, each one burning through armor. Around him, other pods crashed through the ceiling, the walls, the floor. Marines poured out, shooting before they even cleared the doors. "Form up," shouted. "Secure the bay." It was chaos, beautiful, violent chaos. They were big and strong, but they'd been hunting scared civilians for hours. They weren't ready for soldiers who fought back. His plasma cannon roared. Each shot vaporized her completely. She walked forward steadily, firing, reloading, firing again. Nothing stopped her. Minyu was at a control panel, his fingers flying over the alien interface. "Got it," he shouted. Doors slammed shut all around the bay, trapping the inside with the Marines. Now they can't get reinforcements. Sora was already treating a wounded Marine, her hands steady despite the gunfire around her. "You're okay," she told him. "Just a scratch. Get back in the fight." More pods landed. More Marines joined the assault. They moved like they'd trained 1,000 times, because they had. Room by room, corridor by corridor, they pushed forward. "Command, this is Park," spoke into his radio. "We've established beachhead in Cargo Section 7, beginning push toward civilian zone." "Copy that, Captain. All units report successful insertion. We have the element of surprise." Surprise almost laughed. They had been surprised all right. They'd thought the station was theirs. They'd thought no one was coming. They'd been wrong. Lieutenant led her scout team through the dark corridors. They moved silently, weapons ready. Her job was to find the best route to the civilians and map enemy positions. "Contact," one of her scouts whispered. Ahead, a patrol was dragging bodies. Felt anger burn in her chest. She hand-signaled her team. They spread out, taking positions. "Fire!" They died in seconds. His team moved past the bodies without stopping. There was no time for anger, no time for anything except the mission. She reached a junction and activated her scanner. The device showed heat signatures throughout the station, red for blue for civilians. There were so many red signatures, but there were still thousands of blue ones too. "Captain, this is," she reported. "I've found them. The civilians are barricaded in the central habitat ring, but they are massing for an assault. We have maybe an hour before they breach." "Acknowledged," replied. "We're coming, hold your position." But holding was harder than attacking. Steam took cover as more appeared. These ones were bigger with heavier armor. They'd adapted already. They knew the Marines were here. "Grenades!" shouted. Her team threw down the corridor. The explosions were blinding. The screeched and stumbled. In that moment the Marines charged. Close combat, the worst kind. His knife flashed as she dodged claws. Her rifle fired point-blank. Around her, her team fought like demons. They'd trained for this. Humans were smaller than most species, but they were fast and they never stopped. A grabbed, its claws piercing her armor. Pain exploded in her side. She screamed and stabbed upward, driving her blade into the creature's eye. It dropped her and she fell, gasping. "Lieutenant," one of her scouts pulled her up. "Can you move?" "I'm fine," she lied. "Keep going." They fought through 3 more patrols before reaching the habitat ring. Could see the barricades ahead. Behind them, thousands of faces peered out in fear and hope. "This is Lieutenant Terran Marines," she shouted. "We're here to get you out." The civilians erupted in cheers and tears. Some of them fell to their knees. Others reached through the barricades toward the Marines. And the main force arrived 20 minutes later, fighting every step of the way. Smoke filled the corridors. The air tasted like burning metal and blood, but they'd made it. Saw standing at the barricade. The liaison officer's eyes were red from crying. "You came," she whispered. "You actually came." "Of course we came," said. He looked at the massive crowd of civilians behind her. So many different species. So many lives depending on his Marines. "Now let's get you all home." But even as he said it, alarms started blaring. His tactical display showed forces converging from every direction. They'd realized what was happening. They were coming to take back what they'd claimed. The real battle was about to begin. The junction at Corridor 12 became known as the Grinder. That's where Sargent and her squad held the line for 8 hours straight. "Here they come again," someone shouted. Didn't bother looking. She could hear them. The clicking of too many legs. The wet breathing of creatures that shouldn't exist. She aimed her plasma cannon down the corridor and waited. They charged. They always charged. They didn't know any other way to fight. Wave after wave of them climbing over their own dead, desperate to break through. His cannon roared. The first exploded. The second. The third. Her weapon was glowing red from heat. Around her, her squad fired their rifles until the barrels started to melt. "Reloading," someone yelled. Covering, kept firing. Her arms ached. Her eyes burned from smoke. But she couldn't stop. Behind her, thousands of civilians were being evacuated. Every second she held this junction meant more lives saved. A broke through the line. It was huge, covered in scars, obviously a veteran of many battles. It charged straight at. She tried to turn her cannon, but it was too close, too fast. The creature's claw caught her across the chest. Her armor cracked. She felt ribs break. The pain was incredible. She fell backward, gasping. The raised its claw for the killing blow. Then Corporal Minyu Lee was there. The combat engineer tackled the creature, his knife flashing. They went down together, rolling, fighting. Minyu was smaller, weaker, but he was also angrier. He stabbed the 7 times before it stopped moving. "Sarge," Minyu pulled to her feet. "Stay with me." "I'm okay," wheezed. Her chest felt like fire. "How many more?" "Too many," Minyu said, but he smiled. "Good thing we're stubborn." Behind them, Private Sora Nam was working on 3 wounded Marines at once. Her hands were covered in blood. Blue blood, red blood, green blood. So many different species, all bleeding the same way. "I need more bandages," Sora shouted. Use mine, said a civilian. The bird-like alien was tearing cloth from his own clothes. Around him, other civilians were doing the same. Some were carrying ammunition. Some were bringing water. They'd stopped being scared. Now they were helping. Ambassador worked beside Sora, following the medic's instructions. Will he live? She asked, looking at a young Marine who'd lost part of his leg. If I can stop the bleeding, Sora said. Her voice was shaking, but her hands were steady. Just hold this here. Press hard. Press, the Marine screamed. Sora kept working. You're very brave, told the young soldier. Not brave, the Marine gasped. Just doing my job. You came across the galaxy for people you don't know, said. That's the definition of brave. In Corridor 17, Lieutenant and her scouts were playing a deadly game. They discovered something important. They were smart, but they followed patterns. They always checked dark rooms. They always investigated noise. So's team gave them noise. Contact in Section B, she whispered into her radio. Even though she was in Section D, she fired a few shots into the ceiling. Made it sound like a fight. They heard it. They sent forces to investigate, which meant fewer defending other areas. That's 3 squads we pulled away from the eastern route, one of her scouts said. The evacuation shuttles should have a clear path now. Nodded, but she knew this trick would only work a few more times. They were learning. They were adapting. Soon they'd figure out the pattern. Move, she ordered, before they realized we fooled them. Too late, alarms shrieked. They had figured it out, and they were angry. His team ran. Behind them, a tide of poured around the corner. Too many to fight, too many to stop. Minyu screamed into her radio. I need a miracle in Corridor 17. On it, Minyu's voice came back. His team reached a blast door and dove through. Behind them, they were seconds away. Saw their multiple eyes, their snapping mouths. She raised her rifle for one last shot. The corridor exploded. Minyu had rigged the walls with mining charges. The explosion brought down half the ceiling. Debris buried the completely. Felt the shock wave knock her down. When the dust cleared, the corridor was blocked. You're welcome, Minyu's voice said in her ear. Laughed. It was a slightly crazy sound. You beautiful crazy engineer. Drinks are on me when we get home. If we get home, Minyu corrected. But he was smiling. She could hear it in his voice. Captain Park stood in the central command post, watching the tactical display. Every blue dot was a Marine. Every red dot was a... There were so many more red dots. Status report, he ordered. Evacuation is 40% complete, an officer replied. We're getting about 2,000 civilians out every hour, but we're running out of time. They are massing for a major push. Where? Everywhere. They've stopped trying to be smart. They're just going to throw everything at us at once. Studied the map. His Marines were spread thin, too thin. They couldn't hold every position. Something had to give. Pull back from the outer corridors, he decided. Consolidate our forces around the evacuation routes. We don't need to hold the whole station. We just need to hold long enough. Sir, that means abandoning anyone still in the outer sections. I know, jaw tightened, but I can save 10,000 or I can try to save everyone and lose them all. Send the order. It was the hardest decision he'd ever made. The Marines pulled back. It was a controlled retreat, fighting every step, but they left people behind. Could hear them on the radio, civilians crying for help, Marines apologizing as they fell back. Found him in the command post. The liaison officer looked exhausted. There are families still trapped in Section 9, she said. We can't just leave them. I don't have enough soldiers, said simply. Then I'll go, picked up a rifle from a wounded Marine. I'm not a soldier, but I'm not going to sit here while people die. Looked at her. This woman who'd spent her life talking, negotiating, making peace. Now she was ready to fight. I'll send a team with you, he said, but don't try to be a hero. I'm not, said, I'm trying to be human. She left with a squad of 5 Marines. They fought their way into Section 9, found 3 families hiding in a storage room, were already breaking down the door. The Marines opened fire, helped the families run. A little child was crying, picked her up and ran. Behind them, the Marines fought and fell back, fought and fell back. One Marine stayed behind to buy them time, heard the explosion, heard the silence after. She wanted to cry, but she kept running. They made it back with 2 families. One family didn't make it. Neither did 2 of the Marines. Sat down and finally let herself cry, sat beside her. The sergeant's armor was cracked. Her face was covered in bruises, but she was alive. "We can't save everyone," said quietly. "I know," whispered, "but we have to try. That's why we're here." Looked at the civilians being loaded onto shuttles. "That's why we'll keep fighting until there's no one left to save." Night fell on the station, or what passed for night when half the lights were destroyed. The Marines had been fighting for 36 hours straight. They were running on caffeine and stubbornness. Sora had treated over 100 wounded. She was covered in blood. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She sat in a corner and stared at nothing. Found her there, sat down beside the young medic, didn't say anything, just sat. "I lost 3 today," Sora finally said. 3 Marines I couldn't save." "You saved 50, replied. "But I lost 3. "Yes," didn't lie to her, didn't give her empty words. "You lost 3, and it hurts, and it should hurt, but you saved 50, don't forget that." Sora nodded. She wiped her eyes, stood up. "Who's next?" she asked. "Who needs medical attention?" "That's the Spirit," said. In the command post, received a message from his scouts. Lieutenant had discovered something. They had a central command point, a nest, and inside that nest was something important. Their queen. Looked at the location. It was deep in the station, heavily defended, a suicide mission to reach it. But if they killed the queen, they would fall apart. They'd lose their coordination. The Marines could finish the evacuation. Made his decision. He called for volunteers. Every single Marine raised their hand. The strike team gathered in the dark. 20 Marines. That's all could spare. 20 soldiers to kill a queen protected by thousands of her children. "This is voluntary," told them again. "If we fail, the evacuation continues. You're not abandoning anyone by staying behind." No one moved. No one left. Sergeant checked her plasma cannon. Her ribs were taped up, maybe broken, definitely hurting. She ignored the pain. "Where's the nest?" Lieutenant pulled up a hologram. "Reactor level 5. The queen took over the fusion control room. Smart choice. Lots of power for her eggs. Hard to attack because one wrong shot could breach the reactor." "So we have to be careful," someone said. Laughed. It was a harsh sound. "We're about to assault a fortified position with 20 people. Careful already left the building." Corporal Minyu Lee was strapping explosives to his vest. Too many explosives, enough to level a city block. "If we can't kill her conventionally, I can breach the reactor myself. Overload it. Give everyone 90 seconds to evacuate before it blows." "That's suicide," said. Minyu shrugged. "Then I'll die quickly, better than slowly." Private Sora Nam insisted on coming. "You'll need a medic." "Sora, you should stay with the civilians," said gently. "No," the young medic's voice was firm. "Those people will need you to come back. All of you, I'm coming." Looked at his team. They were exhausted, wounded, running on nothing but willpower. They should be resting. They should be evacuating with the civilians. But they were Marines, and Marines didn't leave a job unfinished. "Gear up," he ordered. "We move in 5 minutes." Ambassador found them as they prepared to leave. The diplomat had worked tirelessly beside the Marines. Now she looked at the strike team with something like awe. "You're going to kill their queen," she said. It wasn't a question. "That's the plan," said. "You might not come back." "Probably won't," checked his rifle. But if we do this, the rest of my Marines can finish evacuating your people. Worth it. Was quiet for a long moment. Then she touched his shoulder with her wing. In culture, it was the highest sign of respect. The galaxy will remember this. What you've done here. What you're about to do. We don't need the galaxy to remember, said. We just need you to survive. The strike team moved into the darkness. Scouts led the way, using every trick they knew to avoid patrols. They couldn't fight. Not yet. Fighting meant noise. Noise meant every in the station would come running. They descended 5 levels in complete silence. It took 2 hours. 2 hours of holding their breath every time a patrol passed. 2 hours of being inches from discovery. Finally, they reached the reactor levels. The air was hot here. The walls hummed with energy, and everywhere there were eggs, thousands of them pulsing with life. The Queen's offspring, whispered. She's been building an army. Not anymore, said. She aimed at the eggs. No, said. Not until we're at the nest. We shoot now, they'll know we're coming. It was hard, walking past those eggs, knowing each one would become a monster, but they had to reach the Queen first. The nest entrance was guarded by creatures twice the size of normal, royal guards. Their armor was thick. Their claws were like swords. 8 of them stood watch. Minyu said quietly, can you bring down the corridor on them? Not without bringing down the whole level, Minyu replied. We're too close to the reactor. The structure's unstable. Then we do this the old way, said. She stood up, plasma cannon raised. We go through them. What happened next was the longest 30 seconds of life. The Marines opened fire. The Royal Guards roared and charged. These weren't like the normal, they were smart. They used cover, they flanked. One guard grabbed a Marine and threw him into a wall. The soldier's helmet cracked. He didn't get up. Another guard dodged cannon fire and swung at her. She blocked with the weapon itself. Metal screamed. Her cannon broke in half. The guard drew back for another strike. Grabbed the broken pieces of her cannon and swung them like clubs. She hit the guard in the face. Once, twice. It staggered. She dropped the broken weapon and pulled out her combat knife. The guard was twice her size, covered in armor, had claws that could cut through steel. Didn't care, she jumped on it and started stabbing. The guard screamed. She kept stabbing. By the time it fell, was covered in its blood. 3 Marines were dead, 5 more were wounded, but the guards were down. Through the door, ordered, before more come. They breached the fusion control room. Inside was a nightmare. The Queen was enormous, 50 feet long, bloated with eggs. Her body pulsed. Around her, smaller tended to her every need, and everywhere there were more eggs. The walls were covered with them. Target the Queen, said. Ignore everything else. They opened fire. Plasma bolts struck the Queen's body. She screamed. It was a sound that seemed to shake the entire station. Alarms blared. They came from everywhere, not just soldiers, workers, drones, everything. They swarmed over the Marines like a wave. Went down, dragged under by 3. She fired her pistol point blank, killing them, but more took their place. Sora was trying to reach wounded Marines, but they kept coming. She shot one with her sidearm, missed another. It grabbed her. She screamed. Minyu killed the attacking Sora. Stay close to me, he shouted. The Queen was still alive, still screaming. Her armored hide was too thick. The plasma bolts weren't penetrating deep enough. We need a bigger gun, shouted. Then she looked at the reactor controls, at all that power right there. Minyu, can you overload the reactor? Not without killing us all. Do it, give us 90 seconds. Minyu ran to the controls. His fingers flew over the alien interface. He'd studied technology. He knew what he was doing. I can do it, he said, but I need to stay here. Someone has to manually override the safeties. Everyone understood what that meant. No, Sora said. There has to be another way. There isn't, Minyu smiled at her. Get them out, Sora, all of them. Minyu. "That's an order, Private." Grabbed Minu's shoulder. "Corporal." "I volunteered for this, sir." Minu's hands were steady on the controls. "Now get out. You have 90 seconds once I start this." There were no words. What could anyone say? Saluted. Minu saluted back. Now shouted, "Everyone out." The Marines ran. They carried their wounded. They fought through who didn't even understand what was happening. Behind them, Minu stood alone at the controls. He thought about home, about his family, about the recruits who would come after him, about the civilians who would live because he died. Not a bad way to go, he said to himself. He activated the overload. The reactor began to scream. Power surged. The Queen realized what was happening. She tried to move, tried to escape her chamber, but she was too big, too slow. Minu watched her thrash, watched the terror in her alien eyes. "This is for everyone you killed," he said. Then the world turned white. The explosion was massive. It tore through 3 levels. The Queen and her nest vaporized instantly. Thousands of eggs destroyed. Hundreds of caught in the blast. The strike team barely made it out. They were blown forward by the shockwave. Sora was crying, was silent, stared at nothing. Counted heads, 19 Marines. They'd started with 20. "Minu," a young Marine asked, "did he?" "He bought us time," said. His voice was hard. "He bought those civilians their lives. Don't you dare dishonor that." Throughout the station, they began to change. Without their Queen, they lost their coordination. They stopped working together. They started fighting each other, confused, leaderless. The Marines pushed forward. The evacuation accelerated. Within 6 hours, every living civilian was off the station. Station burned, but 50,000 people lived. In the evacuation ship, Sora sat alone. She held Minu's dog tags. He'd given them to her before the mission. "Just in case," he'd said. Found her there. The sergeant sat down beside the young medic. Neither spoke. Finally, Sora said, "He died saving people he'd never met." "That's what Marines do," replied. "Is it worth it, dying for strangers?" Looked at the crowds of refugees, families holding each other, children laughing, people who'd thought they would die now safe. "Ask them," said. The evacuation fleet arrived at Prime 3 days later, stood at the viewport, watching the planet grow larger. She hadn't slept in 70 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marines dying. Beside her, Ambassador was typing furiously on her tablet. "The Council is calling an emergency session. They want to know what happened. They want explanations." "Explanations?" His voice was bitter. "We called for help, they said no. Humans said yes. What else is there to explain?" Looked at her. Everything apparently. The galaxy is in shock. No one expected this. Expected what? That humans would actually help. That humans would lose so many and keep fighting anyway. The casualty numbers were final now. 127 Marines dead, 89 wounded, many critically. Of the 600 who dropped onto station, barely 400 were walking off under their own power. But 49,000 civilians lived. 49,000 people who would see their families again, who would grow old, who would remember. The landing at Prime was chaos. News crews from across the galaxy had descended on the planet. They wanted interviews. They wanted footage. They wanted to understand how 600 humans had done what entire alien fleets refused to attempt. Captain Park refused all interviews. He walked off the ship with his Marines. They moved together, silent, exhausted. Some were on stretchers, others limped on wounded legs, but they moved together. The crowd at the spaceport was enormous. Thousands of refugees had come to meet their rescuers. They held signs. They cried. They reached out to touch the Marines as they passed. A small child broke through the crowd. She ran up to Sergeant and hugged her leg. "Thank you," the child whispered. "Thank you for saving my mommy." Looked down at the child. Her face was hard, but her eyes were wet. "You're welcome, kid." The council chamber was packed. Representatives from 20 species filled the seats. At the center stood Admiral Song, speaking for humanity. "The humans violated our space," said council member, a hegemony diplomat. "They acted without authorization. They brought violence to our sector." "They brought salvation," Ambassador replied. She stood at the front of the chamber, her feathers ruffled with anger. "When we called for help, you all said no. The humans said yes." "It was reckless," another council member argued. "They could have triggered a larger war with the—" "They killed a queen," shot back. "They destroyed a nest. They saved 50,000 lives, and they lost over 100 soldiers doing it. Where were your soldiers? Where was your recklessness when our people were dying?" The chamber erupted in argument, species shouting at each other, decades of alliances and treaties being questioned, all because humans had done what everyone else refused to do. Admiral Song stood, and the chamber slowly quieted. "We didn't ask for permission," he said simply. "Because if we'd asked, you would have said no, you would have debated, you would have sent committees, and 50,000 people would have died while you talked." "You don't understand galactic politics," said. "Maybe not," Song agreed. "But we understand something else. When someone calls for help, you help them. It doesn't matter if they're human or alien. It doesn't matter if it's dangerous. It doesn't matter if everyone says it's impossible. You help them, because that's what decent beings do." He looked around the chamber. "You say we're new to the galaxy, that we don't understand how things work. Maybe you're right, but maybe the way things work needs to change." Silence. Then Ambassador began to clap, slowly at first. Then others joined, not everyone, but enough. The Confederacy formally requested a military alliance with Earth that same day. Within a week, 6 other species had made similar requests. The memorial service was held a month later. Earth insisted. They wanted to honor their dead properly. The ceremony took place on station itself. The station had been repaired, cleaned, made safe again, but one section remained untouched, the section where Corporal Minyu Lee had died. They built the memorial there, a simple stone wall with names carved into it, 127 names, 127 Marines who'd come when no one else would. Stood before the wall, his uniform was crisp, his medals gleamed, but his eyes were hollow. He'd written letters to 127 families, had told them their sons and daughters had died heroes. It didn't make the pain any less. "Sir," Private Sora Nam stood beside him. She'd been promoted to corporal. She wore Minyu's dog tags around her neck. "It's time." The ceremony began. Admiral Song spoke. Ambassador spoke. Leaders from a dozen species spoke. They praised the Marines, called them heroes, said their sacrifice would never be forgotten. Barely heard any of it. He was looking at the names, remembering faces, remembering the people behind those names. When it was his turn to speak, he walked to the podium slowly, looked out at the crowd, Marines in dress uniforms, civilians from every species, refugees who'd been saved. "I'm not good with words," he began. "I'm a soldier. I follow orders and I complete missions, but I'm going to try." He looked at the memorial wall. "We lost people here. Good people. Young people who had whole lives ahead of them. They died on a station they'd never heard of before, saving people they'd never met, fighting creatures that gave them nightmares." His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and continued. "Some people have asked me why. Why did humans come when everyone else said no? Why did we lose so many Marines for aliens we didn't know?" He met Ambassador's eyes. Then he looked at the refugees in the crowd. "Because someone called for help, that's it. That's the only reason we need. Someone was in trouble, someone needed help, so we came." He paused. "The galaxy works on treaties and politics and complicated rules, but humans work on something simpler. Someone needs help, you help them. That's what Corporal Lee believed when he stayed behind. That's what every Marine who died here believed." They weren't heroes, said quietly. They were just people doing the right thing. And if that makes them heroes, then maybe we're all capable of being heroes. We just have to choose to be. He saluted the memorial wall. Behind him, every Marine in attendance saluted as well. Read the names, all 127 of them. It took almost 10 minutes. The crowd stood in silence. Some cried, others held each other, but everyone listened. When she finished, Ambassador stepped forward. She held a small crystal in her wing. It glowed softly. In culture, she said, we have a tradition. When someone saves a life, we give them a solar crystal. It's our highest honor. It can never be repaid. She placed the crystal at the base of the memorial. I give this to the Marines who saved us, who died for us. You can never be repaid, but you will never be forgotten. One by one, civilians came forward. They placed flowers, tokens, letters, pictures of the families they'd saved. Soon the memorial was covered. A little child placed a drawing. It showed a human in armor standing between her and monsters. Above it, in a child's handwriting, "My hero." Stood before the wall for a long time, she touched Minu's name. "We made it out, brother," she whispered, "all because of you." She'd been offered a desk job. Easy work, no more combat. She'd refused. "Marines don't quit," she'd said. "Minu didn't quit, neither will I." Sora Nam was beside her. The young medic had changed. She was harder now, still kind, but harder. "Do you think it gets easier?" Sora asked. "The memories." "No," said honestly. "But you learn to carry them. You learn that living is how you honor the dead." Lieutenant was being promoted to captain. She'd be leading her own company, more responsibility, more soldiers to keep alive. She stood before the memorial and made a silent promise. She would be ready. Next time someone called for help, she would answer, and she would bring everyone home. 5 years passed. Station became a joint military academy. Human and alien soldiers trained together, learned from each other, built something new. The memorial stood in the center of the station. Cadets passed it every day. They learned the names, learned the stories, learned what it meant to be a Marine. The inscription below the names read, "They heard our cry, they came, remember." On graduation day, new Marines stood before the memorial. Human and a dozen other species, all wearing the same uniform, all taking the same oath. When someone calls for help, we answer. Attended every graduation. He was older now, gray hair, more scars, but he stood straight and proud as new Marines took their oath. After the ceremony, a young cadet approached him. "Sir, I wanted to ask, why did you do it? Why did humans help us?" Smiled. It was a question he'd answered 1,000 times, but he never got tired of answering it. "Because you asked," he said simply. "Because you needed help, because we could. That's what humans do. That's what all good beings should do." "But you lost so many." "We saved so many more," interrupted gently. "Look around you. All these people, all these lives, all these families. They exist because Marines did their job. That's not a loss. That's a victory." The cadet saluted back. That night stood alone before the memorial. He did this every time he visited, talked to the names, told them what had happened since they fell. "The galaxy's different now," he told them. "Other species are starting to help each other, starting to understand what it means to answer a call for help. You started something here, something bigger than any of us." He touched Minu's name. "We're still here," he whispered, "still fighting, still answering when someone calls, just like you taught us." Above the station, ships from a dozen species patrolled together. Humans and aliens working side by side, protecting each other, helping each other. Someone had called for help, and the galaxy had learned to answer. Because that's what humans had taught them. That's what 127 Marines had shown them with their lives. When someone calls for help, you come, you fight, you save who you can, and you never ever leave anyone behind. That was the human way. And now it was becoming the galaxy's way too.